Hi, Jeff. Can you hear me? Can you hear us, Jeff? Not yet.
He's still connecting to audio.
Gotcha. It is really warm up here.
Is it?
I guess. I mean, it was a warm day. I guess they did not have any air. I'm gonna open the door just to let a little air out.
Hey, Mara, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, all right, maybe hit the wrong button. All right. All right. So pretty straightforward tonight.
Yep.
All right.
And Jeff, you can see if someone wants to be the secretary or just, I think Charlie at the last meeting, it wasn't worth really asking for anyone. So he just read the title. You can decide what you want to do.
That's fine. I'll just, that's fine. It's probably just easier.
At least it's not a really long
Get my
title.
other monitor working. Not a very long what?
Title.
Title?
Yeah, those last residential ones had lots of numbers.
Oh, okay. All right, there's that.
Yeah, this one we kind of summarized really into just a couple.
Made it shorter.
Minutes. Agenda. Wait. Okay. All right, I think I'm good. I've got staff report for tonight. We've got an agenda, I've got a script, and I've got minutes from last meeting. Point of order, I always wondered, since I was not at the last meeting, do I still vote on approval of minutes?
No.
We always just kind of do a group approval, and I just always just kept my mouth shut. But if we went to a roll call,
Typically, I think the chair is supposed to say anyone for, anyone opposed, and then normally during the anyone opposed, you would be able to say, I abstain as I was not there.
yeah,
But we usually know who wasn't there, and
yeah.
we usually pretty accurately identify it.
Okay.
No one wants to come. It's too pretty out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a nice day. Do we have any public comments?
Nothing that was submitted.
we
in
know of?
advance. Not to me.
Okay. Okay.
We could have held the meeting outside today.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Would have been lovely.
I hope the presentation isn't too long. Realizing I have a lot of slides.
Oh, we always have these meetings on nights of national championship.
Oh, sorry.
The Board of Adjustment meeting on Thursday is like, I guess that's opening day. So we didn't realize that.
Oh, yeah, that'd be a problem too. Yeah, yeah.
Jeff, you're now up to 4 members, 1 more, and you have a quorum and can technically start. We're about 3 minutes to 7.
All right.
Buenas noches.
Good evening, Neil.
Buenas tardes. Oh. We have Annie, we have Mike, we have
Scott.
Scott. There's Scott. Okay. All right. Everybody's muted.
And the only one who said they couldn't make it was Charlie. So we should have everybody else.
Okay.
Christopher Michael said he was not positive.
Oh, I forgot. Yes.
Potentially needing to be with his kids. But
Okay.
So Tony just came on, Jeff. So you are at 5. We still have a couple more minutes, but you've got your quorum.
Okay. Yeah, we'll just wait till 7. So Steve and Maddie are questions. Okay. All right. Well, we've got 7 o'clock, so let's get going. Are we ready, Mara?
Good to go.
Okay. All right. Good evening. My name is Jeff Smith. I am tonight's chairperson of the Webster Groves Plan Commission. We are a 9-member board of citizens appointed by the City Council to review development proposals and make recommendations to the City Council regarding future development of the city. In addition to the members of the Plan Commission participating via teleconference, we have a few other representatives of the city I would like to introduce. Councilmember Bliss, City Attorney Neil Brunschweiger, Planning and Development Director Mara Perry, Planner Danny Gendusa, Danny Gendusa, and Denise with us?
Yes.
Yes.
Denise Valesky, our recording secretary. Thank you. I would like to welcome you all to tonight's monthly meeting of the commission and take this opportunity to explain how we operate. As indicated in our agenda, we will begin with the regular session of the meeting when we will hear new applications for rezoning or subdivisions. We will hear a staff report and the applicant will explain the proposal. We will then ask for comments from the public. At that time, anyone with an interest in the proposal may indicate to city staff they have a question or would like to express their opinion by clicking on the raise hand feature on Zoom. To make sure that we accurately record your name, we ask that you identify your full name and address at the beginning of your comment. When you make your comments, we ask that you be as concise as possible and not repeat a point made by a previous speaker. We also ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. One person who is a spokesperson for an organization may have 6 minutes to comment. After all citizens have spoken, the applicant will be asked to respond to any questions that have been raised during the hearing. When we have finished reviewing one proposal, we will move on to the next application. Comments concerning items not on the agenda should be made during the public comment section of the agenda near the beginning of the meeting. When we have completed the regular portion of the agenda, we will go into executive session. At that time, the commission will discuss the proposal and may decide to vote on the application or to postpone the decision. You are welcome to remain and listen to the discussion, but there will be no additional opportunity for public comment at that time. Our recommendations are sent to the City Council. In most cases, the City Council will conduct a similar hearing and must enact an ordinance before the proposal is finally approved. If the Plan Commission takes a vote tonight, the City Council will likely take up this issue at its first meeting next month. If you want information regarding our vote or the progress of the application, you may contact staff at City Hall. I would ask that I will read the first item for tonight's regular meeting. First item is approval of minutes from the March 2021 meeting. Do we have any discussion? Do I have a motion to approve?
Second.
I make motion to approve the minutes. Mike.
I second.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded by Annie. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? And I will abstain because I was not at the meeting. All right, next item, public comment. Mara, do we have anyone?
No one is here for public comment on items not on the agenda.
Okay, very good. Moving along, next item, public hearing. 21 PC 01, Lona's Little Eats LLC, 7985 Big Bend Boulevard. An application by Lona's Little Eats LLC for a conditional use permit to allow a restaurant drive-through use located on an 0.41 acre lot at 7985 Big Bend Boulevard in the C Commercial District. Application has been requested to be postponed by the applicant to the May 3rd, 2021 meeting. Okay, so we have no action on that.
Just ask for a vote for postponing
We
it
do.
to the next meeting to a date certain.
Second.
Okay. I have a, no, Mark, I need a first.
Make the
I need a
motion.
motion.
So moved.
Yeah, I need a
Oh,
motion.
So moved. So moved.
Thank you. And Mike is
Second.
seconded. Thank you. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? All right, motion passes. Next item, 21 PC 02 zoning code text amendments, multiple family dwelling regulations. Proposed amendments include changes to the use and dimensional regulations regarding multiple family dwellings in the C, C1, and D commercial districts in sections 53.110 through 53.147 and section 53.159.
Okay, so I will be presenting today and Mara will chime in if there's questions or things that I miss. But essentially we are here to start a discussion about allowing multiple family dwellings in our regular commercial districts. Over the last few months to a year or more, we've had several discussions, inquiries about doing mixed use development or multiple family development in some of our business districts. And we're always having a discussion that yes, this is something that is recommended, allowed in our comprehensive plan, but it's not readily available in our zoning code, in our commercial districts. And it also, it aligns with conversations our city council members have been having about wanting to provide additional housing type options in the city, and and hopefully preserve affordability within Webster Groves. And recently we determined, with a lot of the changes, regulations, updates we've made over the years, to put several standards in place for parking and performance standards, that it seemed appropriate that reasonable proposals that would otherwise already be meeting the requirements we have within those districts should be something we could consider, without needing to get a special rezoning and going through public hearings if they were meeting certain standards. So introducing just a discussion of what kinds of topics we want to consider for if we would be allowing multiple family housing, getting feedback from the Plan Commission, getting questions that we could address at future meetings. That's what we are here for today. I wanted to simply introduce the existing definitions in our zoning code about what multiple family dwellings means. It's a term that could make people nervous, so we just wanted to make sure it's out there what it is we are meaning by multifamily dwelling. In our code, it's a building or portion thereof used or designed as a residence for 3 or more families living independently of each other and doing their own cooking in said building, including apartments and apartment hotels. Within our apartment definition, it mirrors that language, but I just wanted to also be clear that it excludes student housing. Student housing would not be involved with multiple family dwellings if we were to allow it in our regular commercial districts. Just kind of wanted to make sure that was clear from the beginning. Also wanted to identify what we would be meaning by multiple family housing in context of Webster Groves. This could mean triplexes, fourplexes, residences above storefronts. It could mean multi-story apartment buildings, and a mix of, maybe a more intense mix of use is above, simply a apartment above a storefront. These photos are examples of the sort of typology, of housing types we think could be appropriate within, our business districts. These photos are taken from a website and publication called missingmiddlehousing.com. It's a planning effort and sort of planning movement, across the country, simply about trying to expand the understanding and options for missing middle types of housing within communities that would provide, more housing options and potentially more, sustainable type development, and more opportunities for affordable housing within communities. So I thought that these were providing good examples of the sort of typology and level scale of development we'd be considering in Webster Groves. I also wanted to emphasize that we would be looking at this particularly or solely just within our existing business commercial districts. Our major streets on Big Bend, on Lockwood, on Watson, north on Brentwood. And then there are a few scattered commercially zoned, small areas around Webster Groves. Those smaller pockets within, what we're considering would maybe have, less intense, options. But just wanted to be clear, and I'll kind of get into more particulars about, the different districts we'd be looking at later on in the presentation, but just wanted to be clear, this would not be presenting that you'd have an apartment building in single family neighborhoods. And part of our prompting for wanting to have this discussion was, the understanding and realization that our comprehensive plans over the years have always been, amenable and encouraging towards having mixed use development, having residential development in our commercial districts, but it's, for whatever reasons, not eligible within our zoning code. So looking back even to the 1978 comprehensive plan, while it wasn't, in its era, wasn't, forcefully excited in its language about multiple family housing and apartments, in that era, where it did say that apartments, could be appropriate, would be within our commercial districts and in the redevelopment of larger institutional land in the city. And that would be identified from this map from 1978 comprehensive plan. The areas in red where they, identified these would be appropriate areas for residential development. In 2006, the city underwent a planning process specifically on just the commercial areas in the development foundation plan. The 2006 development foundation plan, was actually very strongly encouraging mixed use and multifamily development within many of the city's existing commercial districts. I highlighted a few passages, within the goals and objectives of that planning effort. It encouraged multifamily housing for the reason of for young households and for seniors interested in remaining in the community after they had, no longer necessarily wanted to be maintaining a large single family house, but wanted more options to be able to remain in the community. Also recommending mixed development that would be taxable, adding revenue to the city in walkable areas that seniors would be have ready access to, the community resources and shops and restaurants within Webster Groves. Another aspect of this was that multifamily housing can provide increased tax revenue for the city to provide, the services that citizens rely on. That this type of development promotes greater walkability for residents that would be living close by. And these were all sort of the top objectives and goals identified in the intensive planning and community planning efforts the firm did with residents in 2006. These maps are just a couple of examples of here's the old Webster district on the left, and there's the old Orchard district on the right. They kind of went into, at that time, a little bit more detail than perhaps was necessary, but they relied heavily on allowing multifamily options. You can kind of see if you squint that the darker yellow colors within the map were areas that they had identified at that time as appropriate for multifamily development and apartment uses and mixed uses. Then in 2017, the Plan Commission and City Council and staff worked on developing the comprehensive plan map amendment to integrate the planning efforts from 2006 and 1978 into a single long-term comprehensive land use plan. And within those areas, once again, the city encouraged the purple colors are mixed use areas, areas recommended for mixed use development within the city's major commercial areas. But still, even through those efforts, multifamily housing options are not readily available. You'd have to go through a special rezoning process to have that option. Some of the benefits of having multiple family housing in the community would provide more housing type options for empty nesters seeking to downsize, households without children. Households without children make up the majority of households within the country now. Back in the 1970s, when the original comprehensive plan was developed, it was sort of flipped where it was more like 60-40 households with children to without. And that's flipped now today where it's 60% of households do not have children. And these type of housing option is more amenable, or can be more amenable for households without children. It also provides an opportunity for affordability and multiple price points for more individuals to enter and remain in the community. Adding residents through multifamily housing can provide additional customers for local businesses and households for business attraction. Well-designed multifamily housing in a mixed-use development provides an opportunity for improved walkability in the community. More residents can provide more vitality and activity within the community. You know, walking to the nearby restaurants and shops, and that type of activity fosters more activity and interest within the community. More multifamily housing can also provide opportunity for greater sustainability within the region in maybe discouraging as much sprawl development, doing more infill development with where there's existing resources and development. Multifamily housing also provides an opportunity for the community to be more resilient to market changes. If retail or commercial markets are, in a downswing, or if there's, long-term trends away from office use and function in the future, having the opportunity to have the city have multifamily dwellings and more mixed-use development maybe provides more protection and buffer for the city. Additional residents can also provide additional local tax revenue for the community. We recognize that there are certain concerns and challenges that people might have in thinking about allowing multifamily housing. Some of those might include building height or parking or landscaping, the quality of design, or concerns about traffic and service capacity and infrastructure capacity. Kind of just wanted to highlight this to identify that we understand that those can be concerns, and those are questions that typically come up when we're reviewing a proposal during a rezoning request. We recognize that there's already many protections in place within the community, and as long as the proposal would be meeting these protections and would be going through these standard processes, there may not be a reason to require extra steps in the process to meet standards that are already in place. And we also recognize that while traffic and infrastructure capacity are significant concerns for residents often, with the levels of development we'd be recommending could be administratively approved, we feel that small incremental change wouldn't have enough of an impact to negatively impact our existing systems. If there was an intense level of development proposed, at that point, it would kick over to a special rezoning request, in which we would have to consider the input on the infrastructure system in a more intense public way. So we would be looking at, made some maps just to identify the areas where multifamily housing could be allowed. We've identified simply the C commercial district, typically on Big Bend, Watson, a couple of scattered sites around the city in small commercial pockets. Looking at the D district as well, that's simply many of the properties along Lockwood and Gore are within the existing D commercial district. The zoning code sort of has a special overlay district in the C and D districts on Big Bend and Lockwood and Brentwood and Watson, where it allows some additional height allowance beyond what would typically just be allowed in a regular C district, as long as the development would be meeting certain floor area ratio and site coverage standards. So just wanted to point out that that would be something within the C1 district, you could have development up to 3 stories. And also wanted to include our PC district, which is identified in purple. those are sort of all of the special rezonings that have come through the board, several in recent years. Through the PC district, an applicant would be able to request to have multifamily housing. Some of the existing districts, simply in their ordinances say, we want all of the use types that are already allowed in C and D. So in some of these cases, if we allowed multifamily housing, they would, be automatically allowed to also have multifamily housing in those in select PC districts. The topics we want to go over and be open to questions about specifically just relate to our zoning code in use, height, setbacks, some of the minimum area requirements. We're going to just be sort of covering what are the parking requirements, considering whether we want to put in any kind of protections for front entry and side entry garages. That's sort of a design element we want to maybe be careful about, consider. Also just looking at existing open space requirements and the types of things that have been put in recently for performance standards, tree and landscape ordinance, and stormwater control, which would also come into play. Just wanting to include those in the discussion, so they're understood. These are things that the city is reviewing. So again, multifamily housing is currently allowed only as a conditional use in the D district. So if somebody wanted to do multifamily housing in Old Webster right now, no matter what scale or size, no matter what it is they're doing, they would have to come before the Plan Commission and City Council. It is not allowed within the C commercial district. So anytime proposals have come forward in recent years, we've often directed them towards looking at a PC Plan Commercial district, even if they'd be meeting standards that are already in place. And so it's kind of an extra layer of review that we realize may not be fully necessary. Looking at the existing height regulations, currently you can have up to a 2.5 story building, commercial building in the C district. You can have up to 3 stories in the D commercial district in Old Webster. And then there's a C1 district overlay in certain parts of the C and D district, where it allows you to automatically have 3 stories. You can go, and then it has some sort of, to be honest with you, odd regulations that allow you to go above and beyond 3 stories if you were to meet very small limits on lot coverage and floor area. And kind of looking at what these regulations mean, ironically, you could probably have a 5 or 6 story building as long as it was, very narrow and skinny, not really in character with the, development patterns within the city and what, residents have expressed they desire. But that is sort of an automatic allowance within the code right now. We may want to look at whether we want to retain those site coverage and FAR limitations in the C1. And again, in the C1 areas, that would those are sort of all listed at the bottom within the code. Again, they'd be pretty much on Big Bend, down through Old Orchard, through Crossroads, down to Gray Avenue. They're on Lockwood Avenue, north on Brentwood and Watson. So items for consideration, we would be wanting to likely simply just maintain the existing regulations on height in the C and D districts, maintain allowance for 3 story height in those specific areas of C1, but possibly remove or amend the lot coverage and floor area requirements in C1 that would allow for patterns of development that would more conform with the traditional style of development already in the city. Could possibly make it, if somebody were to want to exceed 3 story height, it could be simply a conditional use request in those C1 areas rather than a full rezoning, which and then there may not be they could conform with all of the other standards within the surrounding district. It may not be as onerous of a process if it were sort of simplified in C1. Also wanting to look at It's just sort of the setback regulations in C and D. These were something that we looked at heavily in 2016 and 2017 in all of our single family residential districts, taking some really long, sort of complicated passages that would require residents to possibly survey the entire block of houses on their street just to figure out where they could put their addition or their locate their new home. So we, fixed those, simplified those in the single family residential district. We realized, now that if we're opening it up, this may be an appropriate time to, simply simplify and consolidate to common sense front yard setback or, all setback regulations in the district. So looking at, so that the initial or the page just before was sort of our straightforward, this is your front yard regulations in C district. However, almost no properties within the city would meet those, standard front yard regulations of a 25 front yard setback. Almost every property would have to, come in under an alternate front yard setback, which has just sort of an incredibly intricate, complicated way of figuring out what your front yard setback should be if you want to do any kind of new development or addition. We figured this may be a good time to just simplify it and allow residents nearby to have a better understanding of where any kind of new development would be, and also give any prospective developers or a property owner looking to sell just a better understanding of what could go on their property. And similarly, within the side yard regulations, it's simply too complicated to figure out what your setback should be. It's a very onerous process and language. And then there's also the existing rear yard, which is fairly straightforward, but we thought it might, we could still probably simplify it, keep things consistent between the C and D districts. We're considering what may make sense, simply be to remove minimum front required setbacks in the C and D district. This could allow new development or redevelopment to be built closer to the street as appropriate. That sort of encourages and establishes opportunity for more walkable districts and activity. It wouldn't necessarily be requiring development to be built to the street, but within the Old Webster district, where our comprehensive plan efforts over the years have encouraged sort of a Main Street type development, maybe encouraging a maximum front yard setback within Old Webster. We'd also want to make sure that any recorded setbacks that are on subdivision plats would still be able to be met, and we want to make sure that no buildings would present any safety and visibility issues for vehicles and pedestrians at intersections and driveways. Those are sort of common sense things we could put in place and not necessarily require someone to survey their entire block to figure out where they can put their building. We've considered removing minimum side yard requirements, except where development is adjacent or directly abutting existing single family dwelling neighborhoods, ensuring that there would still be a minimum buffer, a minimum standard setback for properties sitting right next to a commercial district. We really actually don't have that many instances where there would be someone's side yard directly abutting the side yard of a commercially zoned district. Most of our commercial zoning is sort of just running straight along our major streets. So there's not a lot of residential single family dwelling directly abutting side to side with commercial, but we would want to make sure they'd be in place so there wouldn't have a large commercial building looming over single family homes. We also want to keep it simple and possibly remove the minimum required rear yard setbacks, except where commercial development will be backing up to a single family district, and providing some minimum if you were to provide a small setback, making sure it would be manageable at a minimum 5 or 10 foot distance so that it could be maintained over the years and wouldn't get overgrown or become unmanageable. Also quickly wanted to look at intensity of use and area requirements in the C and D districts. We'd be wanting to probably simply keep the existing requirements in place for the C district, probably make them consistent between, more consistent between C and D. C includes regulations for if you were to allow a single family dwelling in the C district. The D district doesn't allow single family dwelling, so it doesn't really come into play, but they all require a minimum 50-foot lot width for development, for residential development. One item we may want to consider would be the D district requires a minimum of 1,500 square feet per family unit. If you were to allow multifamily development in the D district, that may be, you know, a standard that with our other requirements in place with parking and building height and open space requirements, maybe something we could revisit to reduce or remove altogether if it's not necessary to artificially limit sort of the density and number of units in the community. For parking standards, last year we did a very intensive effort looking at parking standards throughout the community. At this point, we would probably simply seek to maintain those standards, 1.5 parking spaces for every dwelling unit added within a district. There would be opportunities that we put in the code for proposals to come in, requesting less parking. If they, are requesting a certain level below what is required, it would come before City Plan Commission and City Council with a parking and possibly traffic study. Looking at front entry garages was something we sort of became aware of looking through the literature and planning circles about some of the unintended consequences of simply adding multifamily development within existing communities. And part of it revolves around what is the builder ending up doing with garages and parking, structured parking on their lot, and how it can negatively impact neighbors. We have very specific and well orchestrated regulations that would apply to single family development and front entry and side entry garages. All of it is very specific though to single family development. So we thought it may be a good place to consider what are some of the design standards we might put in place to ensure we wouldn't be having something where you'd have a line of parking or garages, facing a residential property, or a prominent garage entry and exit on Lockwood. Something that would really stick out and not be in character and present a barrier to effective walkability within the community. So it might be something that we limit or prohibit the opportunity for front entry attached garage entrances in certain areas on multifamily buildings, maybe limiting the number of garage entrances and exits you could have on a side elevation. It's much less obtrusive if you were to have one entrance and one structured parking system to a neighbor. If you see one garage entrance, than if you have 15 lining your building, lining your windows to your kitchen or your living room. It may be something that if we were to have separate garage entrances on other elevations, we might require the building to have a pedestrian entrance on the primary front elevation, so that we don't have sort of something that other communities have had where there's street facing elevations that are just sort of blank dead spaces. The existing open space requirements in the code, I think, would be pretty effective at preventing some of the things that other communities have faced, where they've had sort of these courtyards of barely any space, not very amenable to community gathering or aesthetically pleasing at all. Our open space requirements would say that if you did have some kind of courtyard development, and you had, a 3-story courtyard development, you'd have to have 50 feet between the wings of that building, and that could that I think would be effective at preventing the kind of thing we see in the photo on the left. Also, just wanted to identify, in 2018, 2019, we did very intensive performance standards that would control the level of vibration, noise, odor, lighting within our districts. All those standards would remain in place. We have our tree and landscape ordinance that would require, intensive landscaping requirements if someone were to do a redevelopment, landscaping requirements around, all, parking features. We will be looking at updating our tree and landscape ordinance, probably this year anyways, but we wouldn't be tying those changes to this proposal. And also, we do have the existing stormwater control that, again, we may be looking at this year and updating, but those protections would still be in place with any kind of multifamily housing development. So that's what I've got in what we've started to consider and look at within our existing code. Mara and I would be glad to take questions or clarify anything that came up. Tony is waving her hand.
Just a opening question, I guess. Is the motivation for these changes to allow for development in straight districts rather than doing planned commercial districts? If a development came in, they could say, okay, it's already in the C district. Here's what which actually gives you the opportunity for more control. Actually, obviously is the planned commercial district, because you can take away and you can add things to it. My other comment is, is this going to encourage more of an urban, are these more urban type requirements or suburban type requirements? I'm all for cleaning up the ordinances for sure, simplifying the setback requirements and dimension requirements. But our commercial districts are, you got Old Orchard and Old Webster are similar, but they're not the same as Watson Road, and they're not in those sort of spot commercial areas. So
Tony, maybe
Yeah.
this helps. So we are hoping for two things. One, we are getting a lot of questions about trying to do some different types of, again, mixed use or multifamily developments. Not something enormous, but when they look at what they can do on the property, no matter what, it is either a CUP or a rezoning, which is a pretty big jump of hoops, when in most cases we would probably encourage it in some of the areas that they've been discussing. So we're trying to make it that both, one, if it's something that we are already encouraging and have been encouraging through our comprehensive plan and our amendments, one of the reasons why they really haven't come forward for many of them is that it's a lot of hoops to jump through for a small project. So if we can move some of these more efficiently under a certain set of regulations, we'll still have that open, that if they can't meet, excuse me, those basics, we still have the PC option. So that's one. But then the other thing is, I would agree with you, we're not, Watson is not like Old Webster or Old Orchard, but if we put in a more urban setback, it still means that if someone wants more of a suburban type development along Watson, that setback allows them to, they're not required to be up at a 0 setback line or a 5-foot setback line. They could sit back 30 feet and still integrate the design of Watson, and it would go through Architecture Review Board. So that provides a little bit more flexibility for some of these, I think, in what we were looking at.
I guess my concern is maybe losing, the reason why they're conditional use permits is because it gives us a little bit more control over some of the requirements that they can do. And I guess my concern is if we make them straight districts, we would lose some of that control. You see what I'm saying?
I see, but I will tell you, in most cases, when CUPs come in, even though we think that we're putting a lot of control in most cases, the ones that go through the CUP are usually pretty straightforward. Lately, all of our ordinances have almost nothing special in them other than hours of operation or something basic. The ones that are needing to do or needing the additional restrictions are the ones that are trying to go into a PC, and they're trying to ask for height, pretty severe, not enough parking, trying to ask for, reductions in landscaping. So what we're trying to do is, if someone still wants to do that, we can still go through the PC, put additional restrictions, go through all of that. But if they can at least meet all these base requirements, why wouldn't we say, on a standard development that can meet the basics, why wouldn't we say, go ahead, you're going to meet this. There's quite a few things to meet while still going through the process.
I agree. Oh, good.
And I think part of it is that despite the very confusing language in the code on setbacks, a lot of it is pretty straightforward in that, at the end result, after pouring through it, interpreting it, that a typical development in anywhere in our commercial districts isn't required to have any setbacks from other commercial properties. It would only be required to have setbacks from a single family residential, which we would be seeking to maintain those same standards in place now. So that really the only thing that would be different between a 3-story office building seeking to come in or a 3-story mixed use residential would be what would be inside the building. It would have the same kind of traffic impact and parking impact and stormwater and everything. It would just be, what are we trying to keep out of our buildings,
Danny, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm having video troubles on and off. I think I at least have the audio worked out for the moment. So you had mentioned, I think briefly, the impacts to traffic and utilities, kind of, some of the 5 factors that we can typically consider with the CUP. So would allowing these uses by right, then there would be no review of those impacts?
Well, I think our assumptions are that if development that was proposed that could meet these standards that are already in place for other types of development wouldn't be having, a significant impact on traffic beyond what we would already expect with what we allow. That if somebody were presenting something that could have a significant impact, it would have to be something at a higher scale than what we are allowing or would be allowing. If they wanted to do something very intense that could impact utility and levels of service, then they would have to come before Planning Commission and City Council. And we do, we would be looking at anytime someone would be building something anyways, our Public Works and Building Department would be looking at, utility service and impact to utilities. But it may not be through a public venue. But that's sort of our assumptions about this, is that the low levels of things we would be saying could be allowed would already not be having a significant impact upon those systems.
Okay.
So you're saying that we as a group or we as a community are okay with 2.5, 3 stories in our C commercial districts and D commercial districts, and then anything above that would have to come into for review anyway.
Correct. Yeah.
So to just give people an idea of how we were hoping to move this forward, Danny was going to prepare for next month's meeting an initial take of a red line with some ideas or thoughts on how to probably clean up on 2 levels, how to clean up the code with just some of the clean up the setback language and other things that we've done recently in single family residential. And then a second one that really talks about the multifamily requirements, and come back next month with those items. Is there anything else on these topics for consideration that you think you want further information on?
Yep. Again, when we're talking about parking, and I like the discussion on parking. I know we don't allow, well, we do have alleys, detached garages with alleys, with alleys being a substandard, being a substandard, width or dimension.
Mhm.
Could you look into that, since we're really trying to encourage the streetscape of basically, the townhouses with parking behind? It would also give you green space, if there was separation between the detached garage.
Mhm.
That just, if you could just look into that to see if it's possible.
Mhm. And that is sort of, I was kind of thinking about that as I was looking at the setback requirements, that what would be in place for most areas, because most of our commercial areas are abutting a single family residence, behind them, that we would put in place, an automatic 25 or 30-foot setback from buildings that would likely, end up in some kind of alley, or would accommodate a rear parking lot with then landscaping around that parking lot area.
Just, yeah, the access. I mean, it gives it an urban feel, if that's, that's what we're going for in those areas, but I'm just looking at it in terms of access and keeping some open space, just some green space.
Mhm. And do you mean like possibly including like minimum standards if somebody were to do an alley drive?
Well, at least give them the option
Mhm.
so that they don't have to put in a street, a standard size street.
Mhm.
I was kind of along with, I think Tony, we just talked about the same thing. I was wondering about the height, if we're gonna, we just went through all this, where the residential, they're building 3 stories tall next to an existing little tiny building. So there on your topics for discussion, number 2, height, I wonder how many, you say you're back in residential, I wonder, how many places you could end up with something overpowering existing.
Yeah, and that's true. But from our, perspective, looking at this, initially, it's that those commercial areas are already allowed by right to have those 3-story buildings or 2.5-story buildings. We would be requiring a similar level of setback to create, a buffer and green space between, if you did have a 3-story building behind a, single family residence, which is the typical pattern in our city, commercial backing up to residential. You could have a 3-story building, but you could have a 3-story building now. We wouldn't be significantly looking to change that in any way.
I guess then with the setbacks and the landscaping requirements.
Gotcha. So maybe considering additional setbacks in those cases.
I mean, this was a lot of information. You guys have done a lot of research. There's a lot of information to present tonight and a lot for us to digest. So I'm sure we'll have, additional comments as we
Mhm.
move forward. I know I will.
So
Do
Jeff,
we need a motion to carry it to next month, or we do that in the next part, or?
we do need to do that, but I
Well,
do
we can do
want
it now.
to let you know, you do have a number of people who are listening in. I think in most cases, they are listening to hear how, the beginnings of this discussion. But I just wanted to put out there that if any of them wants to speak at this time, it is a public hearing. It is open at this time if they did want to speak. And they could still have their 3 minutes. So if any of them did want to speak right now, we are carrying it over. We will have the opportunity to speak at the next month's meeting too. But I wanted, Jeff, for you to just open that up in case someone did want to raise their hand and speak.
Yeah, thanks, Mara. I just wanted to see if we had any other comments from the commission. And if not, we'll open it up to public.
Merle, I don't know if this is something to talk about now, but like, will there be space for gardens or anything like that? Or is that considered in the open space?
That's considered in the open space.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, and we do have, very lengthy involved landscaping requirements anytime someone would do a new development or redevelopment, that we always bring before the board anyways during those rezonings. But those things are just codified for everyone to follow,
Okay.
any kind of new development to follow.
So Jeff, if we're good with all of
Okay.
Commission members, we do have one hand up to speak.
Okay, please, let's recognize them.
Okay. Clark, I've just allowed you to speak if you wanted to unmute.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Just simply want to say, from my perspective, and I'm a 20-year resident here in Webster, the more options we have, the better. My son just recently moved to Columbia, Missouri. He's really 2 blocks from like Old Webster, like 2 blocks from downtown Columbia. He lives in a house with 5 other young professionals, and that would not be allowed here. And he's flat out said, he's 26 years old, I would not live in Webster Groves because of the housing options. So I think my point is just the more options we can afford and we can bring to our community, the more diverse and in terms of economic status, as well as other things will benefit our community, my perspective. That's all I really have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have any other public comment at this point?
Nothing else that I see at this time.
All right, I've lost the screen again, so I'm just flying on audio here.
We can hear you.
All right. All right.
So if you want to take a motion to,
Yes. Yeah, I'm trying to find that screen. I got everything on one screen. Okay, I'll entertain a motion to continue this hearing until next month.
Make the motion,
And you?
continue it.
Do we need to say a date certain?
yes, to a date certain, which would be the May 3rd, 2021 meeting.
Motion
All
to
right, it's moved. Did we have a second?
concern meeting.
All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Mara, do we need to take a roll call vote?
Not for that.
Okay. All right, next item, plats and site plans, none. Next item, adjournment to regular session. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Do we have any other business or announcements?
Oh, that's down in seven apparently.
Oh, I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah, after you go out of
Yeah.
executive. So
Yeah,
Annie,
yeah.
sorry, Annie, motion to go out to executive session,
Yes.
and who
Do I
seconded?
have a second?
A second the motion to go out to executive session.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Okay,
So other,
executive session.
um,
So
So
we have
come-
nothing in executive session, right?
no, nothing in executive session. Just a
Yeah.
couple
All right,
items
other
of
business.
business. So just letting you know, we have, we got 2 submittals today. One is a conditional use permit for the Rolling Ridge site, for some uses within the existing building. That's a CUP. We will start reviewing that, and that should be on as a public hearing at the May 3rd meeting. We also did receive our submittal from SG Collaborative for the rezoning of the redevelopment area. That one, as we review it, the earliest it would be on would be the June meeting, because it's a much more extensive project that we need to review. In the case of both of those projects, the intent is to have, even though we won't have reviewed the documents, we do plan to put the documents on the city's website, just because I know, as would be typical, we're going to get a lot of requests to review them or see them. So hopefully in the next maybe 48 hours, we'll get those digital and put them up on the website so that they're just there and available. But our staff report and our review and our recommendations, in particular before the May meeting for Rolling Ridge, will be out with your packets. And then the same thing when we get done reviewing, we will have a full staff report for the redevelopment area too. So I think those are it. I don't think I have anything really new. All the businesses that the last month that I told you were kicking along and going places, they are continuing to construct and get ready with all the different new businesses we've got coming in. Unless anyone had any questions, I think that's it.
Thank you.
Any questions? All right. Okay, our next regular meeting is May 3rd. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye, opposed? All right, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mara and Danny.
Thanks all.
Good night.
Good night.